Welcome to Truck Tech. I'm Thomas Wasson, and today we're talking about some of the technology that goes into vehicle safety. More specifically, when you're thinking of the big rigs on the road, the Class 8 trucks, there is a lot of safety features that a lot of folks don't understand. And there's one of the things we like to highlight is some of the new safety technology that has been coming into the market. And so we're super excited to have the folks at Volvo Trucks joining us to talk about some of the things. They have been setting new safety standards with their recent release of the VNL and the VNR models. And so we're talking about stuff like side curtain airbags, automatic emergency call systems, even going into things like using higher grade steel in the cab. So every little thing matters. And we're super happy to be joined, of course, with our guest. She's Maddie Sullivan. She's the product marketing manager at Volvo Trucks. Maddie, absolute pleasure. Welcome. Thank you so much for hopping on the show.
Yeah, for sure. I love talking about safety, so very excited to be here.
Let's dive into some of the background first. Volvo is a pioneer. I think you all did the seat belts or the 3-point belts, or you've had a long history of releasing some stuff. Let's talk about the history and then we'll dive into the present day.
Yeah, for sure. So an engineer at Volvo invented the three-point safety belt in 1959, and then immediately released the patent away so that everyone could have seatbelts, which I think is credited with saving millions and millions of lives. We were the first OEM to make the driver airbag standard, and then we're also the only OEM to have an all high-strength steel cab. Just a real history, I think, of leading and pioneering in the safety space. I was talking earlier too about we're one of the only OEMs to do the Swedish impact test, which not only is it, like the most rigorous crash testing, but it was a test that was invented in Sweden, again, with the help of Volvo engineers. So I think Volvo's just really always been on the forefront of not only, inventing new things to help keep people safe, but then also to, again, share that with everybody to keep all of us safe on the road.
And I think that's a big deal because, especially with OEMs, there's test tracks, there's other locations, but having your own in house testing facility where you can test this stuff, that was one of the surprising things I feel like that maybe a lot of folks don't know is there's a lot that goes into these crash tests. So, talk about how unique that Swedish facility is. Is that a very unique thing that you all are testing it in house, or do other people, when you normally do it, you just like send it somewhere to NISTA or you ship it off? What's kind of that look like in the testing environment?
Yeah, so it's not quite in-house. It is where we test all of our Volvo trucks, but it is a location over in Europe, and we even here in the US, we don't have any testing facilities that can do the tests that we need to do to certify all of our new trucks. We have to ship all of these over to Europe, and then do the test and then ship all of them back. So it's a huge investment on Volvo's part. Each of these test trucks cost about $1 million, let alone the cost of logistics and then the cost of the test itself. So it's a really big production to make sure that the all of our new trucks meet that safety standard that we have. But the reason that that facility doesn't exist here is because there's just not a demand for it in the market because we are the only OEM to do these tests with their trucks. I was also just talking to someone else earlier that there's actually not any regulation in the US for crash testing Class 8 vehicles. So it's really just up to the OEM on what they do in that space. And so, of course, we follow the same safety standards that we've been using for the entire life of Volvo trucks, and we continue to do the Swedish impact test.
And let's talk about some of the cool things. One of them is side curtain airbags, which I think is really cool. Driver and passenger. It's a first, North American first for heavy duty trucks. When we're looking at rollover scenarios, that's one of the things that I don't think a lot of people understand is you blow a steer tire, and sometimes this thing will either take a dip down, it'll try to roll over. You're so high off of the ground, you're a few feet from when you step down off of the vehicle. Talk a little bit about that because I think that for folks outside of trucking, these things, it doesn't take much to roll them over. Having managed fleets myself, I've had a few of them be toppled.
Yeah, a picture in the news the other day of a truck that had a rollover just from having a brake issue, and then turned a little bit and then rolled over off the side of the highway. So it really doesn't take much. I think about 40% of truck driver fatalities are single truck accidents. So, they're not these huge mega crashes involving other cars. And a lot of those end up being rollovers. So I think the side curtain airbag is going to be a really great way to save more lives of drivers and occupants. And the great thing about this curtain that we're going to offer today is it's designed for our truck. It covers, the entire side window. It's going to protect you not only your head and your neck, but also, from glass. And might come protruding into the vehicle when you roll over. It's going to help unbelted occupants. So if you're not wearing your seatbelt and you might go flying towards these windows. I mean, these are really going to be very, I think, very significant in, right, in reducing the number of fatalities amongst our drivers.
And it also kind of ties into another one called the eCall emergency system. And this is really cool because I know that, especially when I've managed drivers back in the day in another lifetime, you're trying to call and reach out. But if you've had a rollover event, sometimes you can get knocked unconscious, things can occur. And so, talk about this emergency system. It automatically calls 911 in rollovers or airbag deployments. Walk us through that because I think there's a lot. I've seen it in some telematics companies, but having an OEM have it standard right off the line is something really important, especially given that drivers are in locations that may be hard to access for emergency services and it may take a lot of time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so we're familiar with this in the passenger car space, right? I mean, we've heard of OnStar for a long time, and this is very similar to that. But like you said, it is standard on every truck, and it's not deselectable. So no matter for all the new VNLs and VNRs, when the truck is in an accident where an airbag has deployed or the truck has rolled over, the truck will automatically make a two-way call with 911. So this means that if the driver is able, they can have that two-way conversation with emergency services, but it's automatically going to share the truck's location with emergency services as well. And when it comes to saving lives in terms of, the biggest statistic in terms of creating, not creating, but in transferring an injury to a fatality is the amount of time it takes for EMS to get onto the scene. And so this is really focused on that, to help as quickly as possible. Because like you said, I mean, how often is it that you're on the road, especially as a driver, and you don't know exactly where you are? You don't, you're either between exits and all these things. Like I said, to have EMS be able to know exactly where you are, it doesn't take any subscription required, and it's using or FCC compliant. So it's not necessarily about what cell provider you have. As long as there's a safety access point near the accident, EMS is going to be get the notification.
And the technology is cool because I can imagine one of the big hurdles is making sure it goes to the right location. I've found that a lot of times because I'm out of Chattanooga, but when I manage drivers, what happens if my Montana driver gets in an accident? So now I have to stop what I'm doing, look up who's the local person, how do I reach it? Okay, here's the location. Now I have to stop. So all of this is able to be sent in via this feature now, and it can save, minutes, especially when it can take upwards of 30, 40 minutes for EMS to arrive in very rural locations.
Yeah, and we also offer a manual button for drivers, so it's available right over in the overhead space, and it allows them to initiate that call as well. So I mean, there's a lot of instances where a truck's involved in an accident and the airbag doesn't deploy because it wasn't severe enough for the truck, but maybe they're having a medical emergency, maybe they've been in an accident that's in the passenger car is in not great shape. Maybe they've driven by an accident. There's so many reasons why a truck driver might need to initiate that call, and again, not necessarily knowing exactly where they are. I don't worry about figuring out their location first, just pressing that button, being able to talk to emergency services to let them know what's going on. So definitely going to save a lot of lives.
And we'll shift gears a little bit as well. One of the cool things I think, electronic parking brakes. Now, I finally managed to get inside a Class 8. The irony is, when I worked at U.S. Express, they never let me like ride in the front, and they put me in the back with the new students. You're in the jump seat. But on the
Uh,
front, what's
yeah,
fascinating is these things are very manual air brakes. You pop them out. They always like hit my finger, and I swear like I'm getting like finger
yeah,
bruises. I have dainty hands. But talk about this
it hurts.
electronic. Dive into this so I don't have to pop it out and hit my fingers anymore. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. It is just a regular button that you pull and push. And I mean, it's more than just the button, right? I mean, that's a huge part, especially for me, because I do hate those pneumatic valves. Um, but it allows the system to react so much faster. So now you're going to get faster braking responses. It allows it to, be smart about which wheels it's braking and how much. So it's really the whole electronic braking system is really advanced and is going to help the truck stop faster and more safely. It allows us to also have an automatic engage and disengage feature. So, for example, if I'm a driver and I turn off the truck and open the door, it automatically sets the brake for me. Because I mean, there are trucks that drivers forget at the end of the day, especially when you're driving an automatic, because it's really an automated manual. So there's no park gear unless you set the brakes. That truck is still in neutral. And now, whenever the driver opens the door, it's going to automatically set that brake and it's going to help prevent those rollaways from happening. So there's a lot of different situations where we can kind of control that and make it a lot easier for the driver as well. So huge perk to not have to have those valves and hitting your hands, but there's a lot of other benefits as well.
So let's talk a little bit about the steel usage. One of the fascinating things is that using, especially in the cabs, having weight is a big factor. So I'll give an example. I learned that in certain pickup trucks, they switched more to aluminum and they put little weights because they needed to save weight on the truck. It was a Ford. And so the problem was when they fixed the doors, they couldn't close them right because they didn't have the right weight. And so there's one far extreme where you're trying to cut weight, and Volvo's using the ultra high strength steel to help reinforce the cab. Talk about from an OEM perspective, because that's something I didn't really consider was, there's always a trade off between weight, fuel economy, and safety. But talk about this steel because it seems like you guys are solving one of the trickier things.
Yeah, well, and so what's really great about this new ultra high strength steel is that it's known for its optimized weight to strength ratio. So it is significantly stronger without being heavier. You're not actually adding extra material. It's just done in the forming of the steel itself. Steel is more than twice as strong as the ultra high strength steel that we had in our legacy cab. Again, it's not necessarily adding more weight. It's just so much stronger from the way that it's made. And so that's kind of how we, try to balance that because, of course, weight is a huge concern for our customers. The more that the truck weighs, the less that you can haul. And so we really try to balance what it is that the truck needs to do from a safety perspective. And then also, of course, optimize that with, uh, how can we make it as efficient as possible for our drivers. And so that's where we use the right steel in the right places so that we're not, having too much weight that we don't need. But again, this is a relatively new material. And so that's why we've been able to bring it into this brand new truck.
One of the questions I had is with this new reinforced cab, does the door still need to open or talk about some of the, is there any specific use cases with this steel to make sure? Is it to make sure the frame doesn't deflate or is it where I can still kind of open up my door in the event? Talk a little bit about some of the design process.
Yeah, so this new ultra high strength steel is positioned above both the driver and the passenger door. And so this is really to help protect that survivable space in the event of a rollover. And so, when we do the Swedish impact test that I mentioned earlier, you've got over 3,000 pounds coming for the driver's A pillar, and then also 3,000 pounds coming for the rear wall. And so this is really to make sure that the space around the occupant's head is not going to deform. And then especially we also do a roof crush. So all of the things combined make sure that the cab is going to kind of come crushing in to the driver and passenger sides. So that's why it's positioned there, which
I
also,
like
of course, does help you to be able to open the door when the test is over.
it still has to, oh, that was what I was curious about. So after the
It still
test is
has to
over,
open. Exactly.
I'd hate to be the guy that if I can't open the door for one of the tests and then it's like, Bob, did you check your high strength steel tolerances? And like, it'd be a real embarrassing thing on my performance review.
Yeah, well, it's really impressive because we have the one of our crash cabs is up at our Volvo Customer Center, and it opens just like a brand new truck, despite all the deformation that you can see on the A pillar and the B pillar, just like the brand new truck. I mean, it's really impressive from when you're looking at it. So it's no extra strength required.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit as well. I'm really a big fan of some of the new features. One of them is the ADAS system, which is the active driver assist system for folks who don't know the term. This is cool. Radar and camera tech, collision avoidance. I've got to report on some cool stuff with folks like Bendix and a few other providers are making advanced lidar. I think AEVA makes some types of lidar arrays. Talk about what goes into these ADAS systems and why it's such a big deal. I think that a lot of folks, you think of lidar and radar for robo taxis and autonomy, but they're actually being used in these active collision avoidance systems for manned driver diesel rigs.
Yeah, so I mean, for our new trucks, we're using radar camera. So we've got a forward radar and a forward-looking camera. Then we also have the option to have side radars on both your passenger and the driver's side. And so the way that these work in tandem is the radar is always scanning for objects, and then the camera's job is to identify those objects. So when you're driving on the road, that radar can see, almost 700 feet in front of you, and then it's up to the camera to decide, is that a vehicle, is that a pedestrian, a cyclist? And then once it can identify those things, then the truck can respond accordingly based on how far away it is, how fast it's moving, all of these. Um, and so, when it comes to your more commercial uh, driver-driven vehicles, that's where you're going to see the radar camera fusion is the most common. And then it's more when we get into autonomous that you start seeing lidar, just because, when it comes to kind of the cost benefit and balancing all of that, the lidar technology is still quite expensive. And so we really see the radar camera fusion is kind of the most optimized for the commercial vehicle space, when you have the driver, because ultimately the driver is your most important safety feature in the truck.
And I'm thinking as well, when we're using these ADAS systems, it's one of the fascinating things I've learned from an OEM standpoint is that you also need to make sure your braking and your steering is behaving properly. And there's an age old question: should I steer more to avoid it, or should I brake? Because, like you said earlier, with rollovers, if you brake it too hard, sometimes one of the steers will go a certain way, and then next thing you know, it's like you've rolled the vehicle. So, is that one of the things where it's a combination of having this array in the front, and then it has to not only seamlessly
Mhm.
integrate with the rest of the rig to make sure it can execute.
Yeah, exactly. And so we've got some other features, between like stability control and traction. I mean, all of these things are always working all the time. So when it comes to braking, and then we also have a feature called oversteer guidance, which is again is looking for kind of those oversteer and will help correct if the driver is oversteering. So we've got all these other little features kind of working together using sensors from the truck, whether it's feedback into the brakes or feedback into different sensors on how the truck is tilting, and all of those things together combined with when do we need extra braking versus when do we need to rely more on the driver to steer the truck. But obviously the emergency braking is always going to be hopefully in a straight line if the driver doesn't interfere. And then when you're I mean, we would generally recommend driving straight and then just applying the brake and relying on the emergency braking, but that really does happen more towards when a collision is very, very imminent. um, and I talk about this a lot too when people ask me about, well, the system doesn't necessarily detect animals. It's not trained on that. The camera is only trained on pedestrians and vehicles. But again, is the right decision to try to swerve or to brake or to potentially hit the object in front of you? So there's a lot of different decisions that the truck has to make based on the scenario, and you don't always have enough information in the truck itself to know what's around you and what is the right course of action. So the safest thing the truck can do is stay in its lane, and then brake, when appropriate.
And one of the cool things I think as well, because I actually ran into that. I had a conversation with an autonomous yard dog company, and that's what they ran into at their facility was a bird got in front of it, and so the whole truck just stopped. It didn't know how to handle a bird, and then I had to signal to the mothership, and they're like, "Okay, you can move forward. It'll fly away." And then finally it worked. So that does make a big difference, especially when we're trying to identify what to use and what not to use, because you don't want to have a deer on the side and then it makes it look like it, and then potentially the ADAS locks itself up, and then you got a whole other can of worms. So that's definitely a tricky situation. Wanted to get some thoughts as well. One of the cool ones I think is adaptive high beams. This is really one of those things as a motorist. I drive a little Jetta. I'm very low to the ground. Trucks are very high, and their beams frequently pierce right exactly at eye level. So, talk a little about some of this cool technology for outside of the cab, like forward sign recognition as well, and how that's kind of helping out because I think that's really fascinating. I see too many trucks on the road sometimes. You got your high beams on, they forget, or they're LEDs, and you can't even
Yeah.
tell.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this is really just about how do we drivers are going to over time expect more and more features that they have in their cars to be available in these trucks, right? If I have automatic high beams and road sign recognition in my car, why don't we have this in the Class 8 space? And so again, all of these, if we've agreed that they make driving safer for passenger cars, they would then that has to translate to making it safer to drive Class 8 trucks. And exactly to your point, everyone I'm sure has been blinded at some point by by the high beams of a truck. And so yeah, we definitely encourage everyone to have these automatic high beams, which are going to help make sure that your oncoming traffic is not blinded. And we also have cornering lamps, which are going to give you more vision when you're making slower turns. Road sign recognition is going to help make sure that you can see signs after you've passed them if you miss them for whatever reason. So all of these things we have them in passenger cars. And so we're really trying to bring more of that technology into Class 8 trucks, um, just because it is something that people come to expect, and we agree that they are all helpful from a safety perspective.
Let's dive into benchmarking a little bit. So we've talked about a lot of cool stuff, a lot of safety technology as well. When we're looking at trying to figure out what does it look like, how do we measure the impact? Talk about what some of the things you all are looking at to find out. Hey, is this a really good feature? Or hey, nobody ever used it, so I didn't really like. Maybe for the next iteration we'll just keep it or adjust it.
Yes, I mean we always track the what we call the take rate of these features. So how many of our trucks are really being built with these features that people are ordering, and at the same time, we will always offer what we think are uh, features that are going to help attack the largest chunk of accidents, right? So like forward collision mitigation is the largest single piece of truck accidents. And so we're always going to believe in forward collision mitigation, and however we can improve that going forward, whether that's with improved radar technology or camera technology, adding additional radars or anything like that. I mean, that's always been something that we're looking for going forward. And I think even if we have features that maybe the general public is slower to adopt, if we believe that they really make a difference, especially from a safety perspective, then we're going to continue to push that for sure. But I think there's also a lot of technology that builds on each other, right? So when we launched VDS, which is Volvo Dynamic Steering, back in 2019, it does make a big difference in terms of making it easier to drive, making it more comfortable to drive. But that was kind of the main benefit, right? It's going to help reduce tension in driver's shoulders and things like that. But now we also have it enabling our lane keep assist. So it's going to help keep you within your lane lines, but you can't do that without VDS having that electronic motor on your steering gear. So I think as we, bring more features to kind of existing technology, we'll also see that take rate increase, just to bring more value to something that maybe is building slowly over time.
I really need a test drive. We'll have to bother the Volvo folks to test drive one. That was the first thing I noticed driving some of the vocational Class 8s and then the on-highway ones, is that when you're up top, it's like your shoulders move. You get like this workout, and I don't know,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
like an automated manual. I'm not even like trying to shift it or anything, and so, I love that feature because, to give you an idea, my wife has a BMW, and it doesn't have a rack and pinion, but with my Jetta, I'm just kind of chugging along, and you can feel that on a car trip. So for drivers, that's some of the really cool tech as well that you all are working on. Is it's the little things like how much play, how should the wheel itself do it as a way of helping fight that fatigue when you're driving for like 11 hours a day.
Yeah, I mean, and you don't have a lot of space in that lane to make sure that you're not drifting too far. So you're constantly making these micro adjustments for the whole. And then imagine doing that for 8 hours a day, right? You're gonna be stiff, and you're gonna be sore, and especially if you do that, however many days a week. And so I think a lot of people see VDS as more of a luxury feature, but it's really not. And again, we talk about technology that people expect in their personal cars versus Class 8. If I expect to be comfortable driving my passenger car, I should also expect to be comfortable driving my Class 8 truck, and especially if I'm doing it for my job. I don't want to necessarily be overly straining my body for my job when there is technology out there that can really help prevent that.
And we got a little bit of time left, a little around 2 minutes. Let's talk about looking ahead. There's some really cool tools. One of my favorite is augmented reality. After talking with some of the autonomous trucking companies, there's a lot of cool stuff in the AR feature. What do you think in terms of from Volvo and an OEM standpoint? What are some of these cool advanced systems in the pipeline, or some cool emerging technology that you think folks should pay more attention to as we're thinking about how OEMs are designing the next generation of trucks?
Yeah, we are definitely learning a lot on, when it comes to augmented reality and even virtual reality, and mostly on how right now on how we can help train people on how these systems work, because it's very difficult to set up, demonstrations on a lot of these safety features. You can't just go out on the track and hope that you're not going to run into somebody. And so we're relying a lot on AR and VR to to help teach people about these safety systems. We're also using it, AR especially, to work on how we service the trucks. So we use augmented reality to make sure that there's enough space that people can get into with the right tools and all these things, so that these trucks are serviceable. So it's really about how do we use technology to make what we're already doing more efficient. I think that's where we're seeing it right now. Can't talk too much about what there is to come, but we're definitely trying to utilize it where in all the places where it makes sense.
Well, we're very excited. Thank you so much, Maddie, for hopping on and sharing some of the information with us. If folks want to learn more about Volvo, check out the vehicles as well. What's the best way to get more details?
hmm Yeah, we'll definitely start with our website, volvotrucks.us. And then you can always contact our customer center if they're interested in, trying to get a visit and do that test drive like you're talking about. So those are probably, your two best avenues. And of course, your local dealer is always going to be a great resource as well.
Perfect. Thanks so much for coming on the show. We'll definitely have to catch up again soon as y'all have some more developments.
Absolutely. Thank you, Thomas.
That's going to be a wrap for this episode. But if you're just joining us, we're on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, wherever you can find your podcast needs. Just check it out. It's Truck Tech as well. And then we do some reruns on SiriusXM channel 146, FreightWaves Drive Time. Yes, that's a mouthful, but you should check it out. It's a wonderful show. A lot of great stuff. Give them a look, folks at Volvo. Thanks again so much for hopping on the show. That's a wrap for this episode, but stay tuned. I'll see you again soon.